Welcome back. So today's explainer is diving into an absolute paradigm shift in how we understand markets. We're unpacking a brand new cutting-edge 2025 text called Network Models in Finance, Expanding the Tools for Portfolio and Risk Management by Gorgi Constantinov and Fabozzi. Honestly, if you want to know exactly how the absolute forefront of financial data science is evolving, well, you're in the right place.
Now, I want you to ask yourself a question. What if traditional financial models are actually missing the biggest risks out there? I mean, for decades, we've been taught to analyze assets as if they just exist in a vacuum, right? We look at a stock, we look at a bond, and we measure its individual risk and return. But what if that entire foundational baseline of traditional finance is just fundamentally flawed? What if there are massive, hidden, interconnected risks lurking right underneath our standard modeling? Well, in this explainer, we're going to show you exactly how to uncover them.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, beyond traditional finance. Then 2, the anatomy of financial networks. 3, modeling portfolio networks. 4, managing systemic risk. And finally, 5, the interconnected future.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, beyond traditional finance, the paradigm shift.
So for a really long time, the finance industry has basically looked at assets in completely isolated silos. And by doing that, they're missing the bigger picture. You've got your equities over here, your fixed income over there, maybe some alternatives sprinkled in, but looking at these assets entirely on their own means you completely miss how they influence one another. Because in reality, the financial world is a living, breathing ecosystem. It's kind of like a giant forest. You can't really understand the health of a forest just by staring at one single tree in a vacuum, right? You have to look at the root systems, the soil, how the trees compete for sunlight and share nutrients. It's the exact same thing in finance. We need to reframe how markets actually operate. The relationships between assets, what graph theory calls the edges, they matter just as much, if not more, than the assets themselves.
Which brings us to section 2, anatomy of financial networks, mapping the ecosystem.
Now, as we move into part 1 of Constantinov and Fabozzi's text, we're shifting away from that philosophical problem of isolated assets and getting into the actual fundamental what of financial topology. What we're dealing with here is a literal mapping of a network. Just think about how raw, disconnected data points completely transform into this incredibly intricate, interconnected graph. Each one of those little nodes could be a stock, a hedge fund, maybe an economic factor, and the edges connecting them represent the absolute strength and direction of their relationships. When you start viewing the market through this specific lens, that invisible web of financial connectivity suddenly becomes crystal clear.
But the crucial thing here is actually knowing how to read that web. Chapters 3 and 4 of the text break down these core network properties for us. So you have things like connectedness and components to show exactly how the network links together overall. Then you have clustering and communities, which are super helpful because they reveal which assets are basically moving as a herd. And then, well, my personal favorite is node centrality metrics. Centrality essentially tells you which assets are the most dominant players in the space. Think of it like a massive global bank, right? If that highly central node takes a hit, the entire network is going to feel it. Really understanding these metrics is exactly how you identify the true structural drivers of market behavior.
All right, moving on to section 3, modeling portfolio networks, the how of allocation.
So, shifting into part 2 of the text, the big question is, how do we actually apply these properties in the real world? We've got the theory down, but to physically build portfolios, the authors give us a highly practical network builder's toolkit. In chapters 6 through 8, they lay out a few key things. First, you've got link prediction models to forecast future connections between assets. Then you have statistical and economic models, things like regression-based tools and lasso networks, to sniff out hidden structures in historical data. And finally, probabilistic models, like Markov chains and Bayesian networks, which map out the likelihood of different market states. Now don't worry, you don't need to get totally bogged down in the complex math to get the ultimate goal here. Basically, analysts are using these tools to build highly predictive, causal structures of asset behavior.
And when we apply all of this to portfolio allocation in Chapter 10, the contrast is just stark. Traditional allocation often relies on basic covariance matrices. And let's be totally honest here, those can easily break down exactly when you need them the absolute most, during a crisis. Network-based portfolio optimization, on the other hand, fundamentally upgrades the whole process. By weighting allocations using those centrality metrics we talked about a minute ago, you aren't just optimizing for past returns, you're actually optimizing for the living, breathing structure of the market. You are structurally protecting the portfolio from the ground up. It's a real game changer.
Next up,
Section 4. Managing Systemic Risk, the Why It Matters.
And this brings us to what I consider the true climax of network theory and finance. Entering part 3 of the book, we realize this isn't just about squeezing out a tiny bit of extra alpha. No, this is about defending against catastrophic market failure. In Chapter 11, the authors dive deep into spillover and contagion. Basically, this is the rapid transmission of financial shocks directly across the interconnected edges of a market network. Picture this for a second. Imagine a highly localized real estate shock. In a traditional model, your tech portfolio looks perfectly safe, right? Because you think, hey, I'm diversified across sectors. But a network model might reveal a hidden bridge tie, maybe a shared lending institution that connects that failing real estate sector directly to your tech holdings. Contagion absolutely does not respect traditional sector boundaries. It follows the network edges.
As the authors put it, expanding the tools for portfolio and risk management is no longer optional when defending against systemic contagion. The stakes are just way too high now. So to combat this contagion, Chapter 12 introduces some truly cutting-edge risk indicators. We are talking about evaluating network volatility using serious tools like the Fragility Index, which measures exactly how susceptible the entire system is to a collapse, and Nodal Entropy, which evaluates the sheer chaos and disorder at the individual asset level. By actively tracking these indicators, risk managers can actually spot the warning signs of systemic contagion way before it tears through a portfolio.
Finally, Section 5, the interconnected future, upgrading your strategy.
So, we've covered the theory, we've looked at the models, and we talked about the catastrophic risks. But how does this all apply in your day-to-day? Well, the authors make it crystal clear exactly who needs this text. This is absolutely essential methodology for portfolio managers, risk managers, chief investment officers, and quantitative analysts. Listen, if you are in the business of allocating capital or managing risk, integrating this kind of quantitative modeling with causal network interference is going to give you an unparalleled edge. You're no longer just flying blind, assuming all these assets act independently. You are finally navigating the market as the complex, beautifully interconnected ecosystem it truly is.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Are hidden, interconnected risks lurking inside your own portfolio right now? Are you still relying on legacy models that view the world in isolated silos? Or are you actually ready to map the ecosystem? I highly recommend checking out Constantinov and Fabozzi's work so you can find those hidden links before the market finds them for you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning, and I will see you next time.